ABC News, 3 September 2023, How Filipino fishermen and visitors are at the center of a developing conflict with China. One major regional flashpoint is prominent as leaders from around Asia gather in Jakarta this week for the yearly ASEAN and East Asia summits. Taiwan and 5 other nations have handled their conflicting South China Sea claims for decades. Although there have occasionally been conflicts between boat crews in the disputed area, some view China's recent moves as a significant increase. That may be the strongest indication that Xi Jinping's naval forces think they can take control of the other islands under Philippine sovereignty. A blinding laser was used on a Filipino Coast Guard boat, and Chinese fishing militia and Coast Guard boats have recently swarmed disputed reefs. Outrage was caused in the Philippines last month when it was alleged that a Chinese crew had deployed a water cannon on a supply boat carrying Filipinos. The incident prompted concerns from several nations, including the US and Australia, and the Philippine government called on the Chinese ambassador to deliver a diplomatic protest that was sharply worded. Despite 20 years of failed talks, authorities in the region still holding out hope for negotiations for a code of conduct for the disputed sea are uneasy about China's moves. Many believe China is prolonging the process and concentrating its military installations and ships in the region. The Philippines has faced a David and Goliath struggle to hold on to control over the 11 islands and reefs remaining under Manila's administration, and it has turned to 2 very different forces, tourists and troops. Chinese ships and fishermen are engaged in a heated standoff. Fisherman Xi is accustomed to seeing Chinese Coast Guard vessels within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. Having fished the South China Sea for 20 years, the 47-year-old claims to have seen vessels utilize water cannons to eject their crew from contested rocks. He related an incident in April of this year close to the contentious Second Thomas Shoal, which the ABC could not independently confirm. The Chinese fleets are constantly present, according to Zaldi Albi, a ferry captain who frequently transports diesel to the soldiers and citizens of Pag-asa, the largest island under Philippine sovereignty. They will surround our ferry with their Coast Guard ships and drive us away if they see us approaching Engan Shoal on the way to Pag-asa, the man claimed. He claimed that although the Coast Guard and fishing militia fleets are also present in the Pag-asa area, they are more inclined to let the Filipino crude ferry sail through to provide supplies. The men claim that although outnumbered, the Philippines' Coast Guard and small naval boats offer some protection. China's top goal seems to be Engan, also known as the Second Thomas Shoal. In a shift in tactics, the Philippine government has begun releasing videos of incidents at sea. A water cannon successfully prevented one of the 2 resupply boats that attempted to reach the Second Thomas Shoal in early August. In late August, another resupply mission was successful, but Beijing, for the first time, released a statement asserting that it allowed the resupply of food for humanitarian reasons. According to Justin Buquaisel, an analyst with the research group Fax Asia situated in Manila, located on that rhetoric, China is preparing the groundwork for future escalations. According to him, the turning point will occur if the Philippine government proceeds to fortify the deteriorating World War II air vessel. 24 years ago, the Philippines purposefully ran aground on the reef in the Sierra Madre, and now a tiny contingent of Filipino soldiers passes through it. According to China's government, the resupply boats were transporting building supplies to the ship and were trespassing on undisputed Chinese land, which backed the Coast Guard's recent actions. According to Beijing officials, China's Coast Guard exercised patience and insisted that the Philippine government tow the corroding ship away permanently. Australia conducts military exercises with the Philippines. The most extensive bilateral set of exercises in the history of the Philippines, which included war games on the island of Luzon, comprised over 1,000 Australian military troops towards the end of last month. Their goal was to retake the region that the mock enemy had conquered in the Philippines, and they planned to do this by staging ground battle simulations, beach landings, and parachute squads. Along with training at sea, further drills were conducted on Palawan, another island facing the South China Sea, to bring Australian and Filipino soldiers closer than before. As Defence Minister Richard Marles said, Australia and the Philippines have probably never been as strategically aligned as we are right now. Marles had travelled to the island of Luzon to see the maneuvers. President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. of the nation was seated next to him, and he announced that he would talk about strengthening security relations when Prime Minister Anthony Albanese visited Manila later this week. It's possible that when the two leaders meet, they will even declare joint patrols to uphold international law in disputed waters. According to Mr. Bukwizal, Manila is attempting to normalize the presence of as many actors as possible because it cannot deter China on its own, even if their forces choose not to confront China. China will reconsider inappropriate actions in those areas if the Philippines regularly conducts military drills. Only a few months after Mr. Marcos gave the U.S. military more access to U.S. bases, including one on Palawan close to the disputed Spratly Island chain, the U.S. military is moving toward joint patrols. There's a new sense of urgency in Manila following years of witnessing China amass military bases and seize control of disputed reefs within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Also, it is being supported by those who directly see China's aggression. The Philippines is making a new claim by employing a cunning tactic. The Philippines is sending in additional boats, coastguard patrols, and military drills to keep control of the islands. This year, week-long journeys between islands under Philippine authority were initiated by small group tourism boats that provide fishing and diving tours. The trips are intended to become a yearly event. The program's tourism officer, Ken Haponda, characterizes the excursions as a soft diplomacy tactic to support Philippine claims. He told ABC in Puerto Princesa, where the excursions began, "I think there is no stopping us from using resources in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, as long as we have the civilian and military personnel on the islands." He claims that many patriotic Filipino tourists find this eye-opening as the Chinese ships closely observe the tourism vessels. "I think we'll carry on with the program as long as they don't obstruct it," he stated. The long-term objective is to declare the group of Philippine-run islands collectively known as the Kalaya a special tourism zone. However, he claims that the tourist boats only visit the islands, reefs, and sandbars, which are, at least for the time being, less controversial, and they avoid the second Thomas Shoal. According to him, tourism allows regular Filipinos to witness the actual circumstances, and their images and films also convey to the world what is happening. The code of conduct remains unfinished. Few analysts think Mr. Xi's soldiers are getting ready to take control of the other disputed islands, including the second Thomas Shoal, anytime soon. Instead, they claim that China is attempting to maintain its so-called gray zone strategies to stop the boats of other countries that want to conduct business in the disputed waters. He claimed that China faces significant risks in moving through with the BRP Sierra Madre due to a mutual defense treaty with the United States. He stated that although it doesn't seem like a matter of the Chinese military landing there and forcing people off the ship, it is evident that China's officials believe they have some leeway in making things challenging for the resupply operations. Beijing will press forward at this week's ASEAN meeting with a painfully slow diplomatic process to create a code of conduct for the disputed waters, even as the clashes on the water persist. Despite promises from regional leaders to continue the negotiations, the code has become a running joke after 20 years of discussions with ASEAN countries. The frontline states believe that the code of conduct is meaningless. According to Dr. Graham, China is now using it to take advantage of ASEAN's investment in process rather than product. Mr. Buchweisel characterizes the conversations as trying to tie up diplomatic and political resources. At the same time, China tried to drive Filipino boats out of the disputed sea, a tactic known as strategic exhaustion for the Philippines. In contrast to several other states with claims, the Philippines does not extract oil or gas, partly because attempts to do so cooperatively with assistance from China and Vietnam have encountered several obstacles. In the long run, the Philippines' food security and coastal populations may suffer economically from the inability to bring home sizable catches. However, fishermen such as Mr. Kabiroy are not giving up in the interim. With a toothy grin, he remarked, "We'll head back out to the West Philippine Sea next month," referring to the region by its Filipino name. "Because that's where we fish."